Well, welcome everyone to this meeting of the Nairnshire Committee for Wednesday, 15th of September. I don't think we have any apologies for today, and all who have to be here are here or are about to come here, so that's good. Declarations of interest, I think, Laurie, we have a usual one from yourself.
Just the usual one for housing.
Right.
Oh gosh, and I can't remember the tone of words. If we go back off the previous, I'll go off the previous minutes.
Right. Okay. Right. If I may just depart for a moment, given particular...
Chair, sorry, just to go in there, just to be clear on Councillor Fraser's declaration, just to be clear for the record, is that a non-financial declaration, Laurie?
No, it's non-financial. It's because I undertake work for the housing department, but the work is so remote that does not affect my ability to act as a councillor.
Great. So you'll stay. You've made a declaration, but you'll stay and take part in the debate. Thank you. Sorry, Chair. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
No, that's okay. Thank you. If I may just insert one remark at this particular point in time. First of all, to thank you, David, for stepping in and supporting us in the last weeks, particularly. We appreciate that very much, you giving of your time, and also to note that Emma, who was in post, is on medical leave, and we wish her well officially on behalf of all members and folk associated with this. I think it's appropriate to say that publicly, and we look forward to the time when hopefully she will be fit, well, and back with us, continuing the good work that she has done. So thank you, Mr. Haas, and also officially I will be passing on our regards to Emma for the work she's done and hoping she recovers well. So we move on now back to the agenda. We have the Police Scotland Area Performance Report, and we welcome Inspector Vince Duch. And Vince, we hand over now to yourself, okay?
Good morning, and thank you for the warm sort of welcome there, Tom. Just obviously in line with previous meetings, I'll try not to be too repetitive, but I do understand the report has been shared with you, and it covers that period from the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2021. So I'll just kill my radio here. So really I'll just touch on a few points when we look at the key policing priorities, talk about some of the sort of common sort of challenges that we're facing at the moment, and then just open it for questions as well. So I think the breakdown of the areas is probably fairly familiar, the first being road safety and road crime. Really, I think it's pleasing to note the number of drink or drug driving offences have actually gone down over the period. So it's a slight decrease there, but I think that's positive because there had been a sort of an increasing sort of picture previously. Again, social situation, it's probably coming back a bit more to normal now. So we'll see how those figures sort of play out. But I think it's good to see there's a slight drop there at the moment. Number of persons charged with speeding, again, that's dropped. But again, perhaps the opportunities to take speeding enforcement activities has probably dropped away as well, just when we're covering other duties. So, but that's for road safety and road crime. Next, moving on to acquisitive crime or dishonesties, as we used to sort of call it. The first thing there to really highlight, just theft by house break-ins, they've actually gone up over the period. So there's an increase from 3 up to 8. That's quite an increase, really. We have seen a number of break-ins in the Cleppington and the more sort of rural areas outlying of Nairn itself. Thankfully, the majority of these have been detected. We've had an individual charged, well, 2 individuals charged. One from Nairnshire, it's obviously somebody who's travelling to the area, and we actually managed to get some of the property recovered as well for those incidents. A couple of weeks ago, we actually had the officers were out doing the anti-crime patrols during the night, and they actually caught an individual in a house that had been targeted before. So that boy was arrested, and he's actually been charged with 2 offences now in relation to the same sort of vulnerable property. It'd be probably fair to call it that. So most of these offences are certainly detected. So shopliftings, yeah, they're fairly sort of stable sort of figure. Certain names will come to the fore, and we do try to do our best with linking in with the shops just to try and improve, you know, their own security measures. But some of these offences can be fairly blatant, you know, despite the best efforts of the shops. So, but the figures are fairly stable there for those ones. So that's really all to highlight from the acquisitive crime. Antisocial behaviour. Again, obviously the pubs and the licensed premises haven't been quite as active or as busy as they would have previously. So the figures for a breach of the peace, assaults, they've both dropped, which is good. Less victims of crime. Number of vandalisms have gone up slightly, but we did have, there was a night in particular when there was a large number of vehicles damaged in the town. So I think that probably ties into that particular incident. Next category to look at is really the offences of sexual crimes. Thankfully for the recording period, these figures are significantly down, but again, that can vary. These figures or these crimes can often be historic cases where we have a large number of victims or offences. So, but at the moment, those figures are down over the period. That's all I would probably highlight from the report itself. Usually I always do say that the figures only show so much of the picture. The majority of our calls are to do with vulnerable persons, persons in crisis. I think it's probably a way to sum it up. Yeah, yesterday, for example, we had 2 missing persons, the day before 3, and it's just a lot of work goes into getting them resolved. But I'd say that's the nature of policing across Scotland, I would say. The majority of the officers' time is actually not dealing with crime. So, and I guess against COVID as well, it's just been the challenge of maintaining staffing levels. Obviously, contact tracing, you know, we'll have, you know, you're pulling to get officers together for certain operations, and you know, if you start, obviously you have contact tracing, etc., it can really impact your staffing. So sometimes we're having to backfill other areas, or other areas are coming in to support us. So it's been a sort of very flexible pattern, but you know, thankfully so far we've been able to sort of weather the different sort of challenges that we've had. But I think that's common across the sort of public sector. It's been a case of just looking at what challenges you have each day and just trying to find a different solution. So, but yeah, I think, yeah, like I say, that's not unique to the police at all. So I'll probably round it off there and just open it up to any questions that members might have.
Thank you very much, Vince. Any of my colleagues, any thoughts, reflection there? One area, perhaps, I don't know how badly this affects our area at all. We hear an awful lot about these scams that are going on, and particularly maybe elderly or vulnerable people. Have you any awareness of that or comment on that at all?
Yeah, I think it's certainly been a feature recently, over recent years, where it's almost, you would think the scams or the fraudsters will identify a certain postcode where you have quite honest, trustworthy, and perhaps elderly people that are getting scammed, and yeah, and they're always adapting. They're adapting the stories as well, that to the point that, you know, I'm having to warn my own sort of family about them because they're just becoming so clever and devious, really. We have had a program rolled out locally where we do try to speak to the branches, the different banks, and quite a lot of offences now have been stopped by the banks. Just, you know, when, you know, people are perhaps attending to withdraw large sums of money, the folk in the banks are asking all the right questions and just perhaps giving us enough time so that basically we get to attend the bank branch and, you know, speak to the person involved. The difficulty is obviously when it happens over the phone and people pass certain details, and yeah, it's awful. I mean, it's, you know, you'll see somebody perhaps like, say, a retired area nurse, etc., that's, you know, saved all their money, all the days, lived a good life, been really quite frugal in what they've done, and then they've lost, a large amount of money just overnight. So it's awful. It has hit this area. We've not been immune to it at all.
Thank you very much. I think, Liz, you were next, please. Any thought?
Yes, thank you. On that comment that you made, Tom, I do think they target older people. I've heard of several older people, and I don't know how they manage to find out what age group they're actually getting, but it seems to be older people that's been targeted. I'd like to ask, now that lockdown's been lifted a bit, I think people are that used to not going out. Has there been any problems? You see down south there's been problems with large parties and things happening, but you've not heard of anything up here. So are we generally being much better behaved than they are down in the central belt and in England?
Yeah, I think it's fair. It's fair to say that people have behaved. The vast majority of people have behaved, very well. We've had the odd gathering, perhaps, groups of people gathering with music, speakers, etc. But they haven't been particularly large, these gatherings. We've been able to go along. A number of people have been charged, and issued with tickets, etc. So. But in terms of, thankfully, it's still the same local people we're dealing with. So the vast majority of people take the warnings on board for house parties, etc. So I think it has been good to the way that people have realised their responsibilities. I think it has been pleasing, I think.
Thank you. And just wondering if the COVID passports that are going to be coming in at the beginning of October, have you got any information about them as well, please?
No, I don't. It's a case of just keeping up to date on a regular basis myself. It's just we used to get amendments to legislation perhaps twice a year, but now it seems to be every other day we're getting bits of pieces to keep up to date with. So no, I don't have any further information on the passports, but it will be interesting. Thankfully, we've got good relationships, I think, with the vast majority of the nightclubs and licensed premises, etc. So hopefully that'll stand us in good stead, I think.
I think you are next, Peter, if you have a question or a comment. You're on mute, Peter.
My apologies. I've got two mice on my desk and I was using the wrong one. I was attending a board meeting of the Nairn River Salmon Board, and we were discussing the question of poaching, and there was a suggestion that there are groups, small gangs of individuals who are not only indulging in poaching on the river, but also partaking in thefts from farms and hare coursing and such like. Have you had any reports of such activities?
Certainly in terms of the poaching and I think there's been a couple of incidents of concern highlighted on the River Nairn. Further up towards, I'm trying to think, it was the Clava area, just about the pools at Clava, which was slightly out of our area, but we do have one of the local officers who's a wildlife trained officer. So he teamed up with another wildlife trained officer from Dingwall, and they were doing some poaching anti-crime patrols on the River Nairn. I can't remember the name of the lady that we had links in relation to the River Nairn, but she was able to provide us with some information. So we have had reports about the poaching activity at the Clava. I can't remember if it was to do with nets or was it a particular sort of type of fishing, was it with the prawn, etc. But certainly the officers have done some extra sort of patrols there and linking in with the sort of the fishery folk on that stretch.
Perhaps, is there anything, Peter mentioned the possibility of hare coursing or anything like that? You know reports of that, Vince?
Certainly, the hill caution doesn't feature as much here as it does in the central belt, but you will tend to find that, you know, an individual perhaps that will be involved in theft, you know, could well be involved in the hare caution, could well be involved in other activities where they don't abide by the rules. For example, you know, they're fishing the river systems in certain ways that, you know, they're going to hit the river stocks pretty hard. So quite often the same people will feature. Yeah, obviously they've been the target of our anti-crime patrols, really, that we've had carried out. So obviously I referred back to the boy we caught in the breaking into the house. So yeah, absolutely, these folk are involved across a number of crimes, I think, historically.
Yeah, David, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to add my thanks to Police Scotland and Vince and his team, because, as you know, Chair, we have set up the visitor management group for Nairn, which includes Inverness as well. And that group has operated very effectively over the last couple of months to ensure the safety and well-being of our visitors and how they connect with the community. And Vince and his team have played a major role, and it's addressed quite a number of issues which have made the experience for everyone visiting Nairn better. And that ranges from everything from water safety to parking and littering, etc. So just to thank you through you, Chair, for Vince and his team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Much appreciated. Any other thoughts or comments?
No, thanks. Good report. It's fine. No comments on it.
Yep. The only thing that maybe crosses my mind, which is maybe an unnoticed difficulty, is convincing people about home security. I live in the street where there's a lady who's lived in Nairn all her life. She's never locked her door, ever. But now she has at long last been convinced that perhaps home security is an issue. And but that is just, as our society evolves, what goes on. But with no further comment, I would echo what David had said, but from a slightly different perspective. We appreciate very much the work the police do across the community. And again, we hear in the report that a great deal of their work is not criminality, it's actually supporting people, it's helping people, and it's keeping people safe. And we appreciate that very much. So thank you very much for the report, Vince. And you can be assured that we do appreciate very much the work that you, your officers and your staff do for us here in the community. So thank you again.
No, thank you very much. I'll ring off just now, but just to say it is great to have sort of the working relationship that we do, because I'm conscious that sometimes we aren't able to respond as quickly as we would like to certain issues, but as soon as we do get available resources, we certainly do try to tackle the issues. There's lots more I'd like to do, and hopefully just once things get back to more sort of normal circumstances and we can start tackling some more immediate local community issues. But thanks very much for all the support.
Okay. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, folks, we are moving on, I think, to, he'll get the correct report up. We're moving on to our report about the Sandown development, and we have a number of people present. We have Sarah as our Common Good Officer. We have Alison as well, and David. So between those three persons, I think we'll be guided through the report and see how we go. Am I correct, David?
You're correct, Chair, and I believe Sarah will open and followed by Alison, and I'll be there too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's over to you, Sarah, to initiate this report and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. Yes, members, you have a report before you that provides an update on the position of Sandown and contains our proposals for suggestions on additional consultation. When the outcome of the last public consultation came before yourselves at the last area committee meeting, it was accepted that there were there was quite a lot of information contained in the analysis document, and some time needed to be taken to give due consideration to the contents of that document, and also to allow for consideration as to the appropriate way forward and what the next steps were to be. Some time was taken to do that, and what was coming out very clearly from the considerations that took place between officers and between members was that perhaps it only reflected a very small element of the Nairn and the wider Nairnshire community. We had just under 100 responses, which, whilst good for consultations across common good, is perhaps, given the nature of the asset, not as many as we would have liked. And what was also coming through from the type of responses we were getting was that although the consultation document referenced the Sandown development brief and in fact produced excerpts from the Sandown development brief, that there was some misunderstanding and confusion about the contents of that brief, about what was already included in the brief, and some of the things that were getting mentioned were already covered in that document. We were also felt that perhaps we were not getting as many proposals coming forward for what people wanted to see done with the land in a proactive way. So there were a number of issues that started to come up through the process as we considered the nature of the analysis. And as you may recall, members, it took quite a lot of time to pull that document together. So we weren't able to have that consideration before the last meeting. But we felt that what might be appropriate was to look at an additional period of consultation and to look at how we could target that consultation in a way that perhaps drew out previously unused groups of the community, perhaps groups of the community that were not familiar with the whole process of undertaking consultations, of being part of consultations, or who hadn't perhaps thought that it was anything for them to be involved with, and to look at how we produced and targeted such an approach, and also to look at how we could actually find out what people understood about the Sandown development brief, what's in that brief, what it means for Nairn, and what people were looking for and what they really thought could be done as far as Sandown is concerned. The Community Empowerment Act 2015 is quite clear that we have to allow a period of at least 8 weeks for a public consultation, and then we come back with an outcome of that consultation and we consider a decision. There's nothing in that prevents us from saying that actually that information is not sufficient to consider a decision and we need a wider period of consultation. There's nothing in the Act and nothing in the guidance that in any way prevents us from looking at the information that we've gathered and saying, well, actually, we need to go a bit wider, we need to widen it, and we need to gather more information. In fact, I think we would be criticised if we didn't do that in the circumstances. So I'm quite happy that we're within the legal position in being able to go out for a further period of consultation. Consideration was then given as to what that period of consultation should cover, and at paragraph 4.8 in the report before you this morning, members, it contains the type of practical methods that we're proposing would be useful in gathering the additional information. So how we might do that, and the types of locations and the types of organisations we might seek to target to be involved in gathering that information. It certainly is something that perhaps would have been difficult to have done at the time we conducted the original consultation, given all the ongoing restrictions at the time. That doesn't mean that period of consultation wasn't extremely useful. It was, and I suspect that even without the interruption of COVID, we might still have found ourselves in this position anyway, where we looked at the information we received and felt that we needed to perhaps be more specific about some additional areas of information. So the previous consultation was a very useful exercise. It's focused our minds and it's highlighted where there are gaps in the information before you. So that's the type of areas that we're looking to target. And also contained with the report is an appendix, Appendix 1, which sort of gives a draft document that will be used as a way forward for the continued consultation. It contains information regarding the background on the analysis. It contains information regarding the Sandown brief, together with a link to access it. A copy of that can be provided in hard copy on request. I'm more than happy to do that if anyone requests that. That's not a difficulty. And it also contains a number of questions to focus the mind, to target the specific additional information. The additional period of consultation is open to anyone. It's open to people that have previously participated in the consultation. We would hope that we wouldn't receive just a complete repeat of their responses, that any responses we may receive from previous people may be in addition, but also it might spark people to look at the original consultation paper and might want to actually put in and submit a response to the full consultation. And that I'm also happy with taking into account and incorporating into the analysis. The aim would be that any information gained from this additional period would be analysed and then would be combined with the information that's already before you members, so that we have a complete overall picture of what the consultation has achieved in the process. So the report is asking you to consider the contents of the report, the process going out for additional consultation, and the nature of that consultation. One of the other things that you'll have to consider also this morning, members, is how long a period that you may wish to offer for that consultation. My understanding is the hope is that any outcome would be brought back to the first committee meeting in 2022. I would ask, based on previous experience, that perhaps if that's February, the whole of January is allowed to at least produce the analysis and combine it with the previous analysis. It was on the last occasion certainly a good 4 to 6 weeks solid work to produce the document that was before you on that occasion. So you really have from as soon as it's possible to set up the community-based processes, and I'm sure David and Alison will have more information on that, until perhaps the end of the year, avoiding maybe the Christmas period again, to have available as a public consultation period. So whether you want to offer a further 8-week period or 6 weeks, or however long it's felt, that targeted consultation, and again, as I say, David and Alison may have some ideas on that. That's a matter for yourselves this morning, members, as to what you think is the appropriate way forward on timeframes. So I think that's all I'd like to say on the document. Happy to answer any questions. I don't know if there's anything specific you want to hear about from David and Alison at this stage, or whether you want to move on to any questions.
Okay, Liz, if you want to come in, I think maybe we'll hear from Alison about maybe complementing what Sarah has had to say, but any questions first of what Sarah has had to say?
Yeah, this is a particular question about the length of the consultation period that Sarah mentioned. And I wondered, when we're making our mind up how long it should be open for, what the response rate has been. For example, at the start of a consultation, do you get a flurry of a lot of things, and then as it lengthens out, there's less and less responses coming in? Or is it generally spread throughout the whole consultation period that you get significant representation?
Okay, Sarah or Alison. Sarah, maybe you want to pick up on that first?
Yeah, it varies from consultation to consultation. Nairn was a very active consultation, and certainly initially we got quite a few initially, but there was no period of time where we weren't getting responses. That's not always the case in other consultations. In other consultations, we may have an absolute flurry when it's just been published and everyone is very, very aware of it, and it then may tail off. Sometimes it then comes along that we get a little burst at the end when people realise that they've been putting off their responses, and then suddenly realise they're running close to the closing date. We do from time to time have consultations where we get very few responses. I've currently got one sitting on the books where I haven't had a single response, which is quite unusual, although in the circumstances perhaps not. So I think, given the manner in which we're proposing to do it as well, because it's going to be part of a targeted programme of work, I think we can perhaps expect that any responses are gathered and submitted. So it's going to be perhaps a more controlled gathering of certain aspects of the information, with the remaining responses may be coming in as they would normally do. But certainly Nairn tends to be, with the Nairn consultations, they tend to spread through the consultation periods. I think it's people either have an immediate response and fire in a response to it, or they take some time to think about it, or they panic that they're coming to the closing stages. But there's always a steady feed of responses into Nairn. It's never one of the ones that I think is never going to respond or is going to be a panic response.
Yeah. Alison, do you have anything you wish to add to that at the moment before we go to Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I think Sarah's outlined it very well. I think we would expect with this sort of consultation, and they do vary, as Sarah had said, very much, we would expect responses to come in throughout the period, and particularly, as Sarah's highlighted, that targeted nature that we're proposing for the engagement through this, and working with partner agencies, trusted organisations to gather some of that information. That will be a process that is ongoing over the weeks of the consultation. At the present time in the report, we've recommended that we allow up until the end of December for that to take place. So that gives time for that process to be undertaken, but equally, as Sarah's highlighted, to allow her that period at the other end to get analyse the information that's coming forward. Yep. So that's why it's proposed the way that it is at the moment, members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Peter, question or comment?
Thank you. My comments are in relation to the draft questions in the appendix. I would have been more specific in the questioning. Question 2, what are your views? I would have made that more targeted. And there are 2 specific areas which I think should be included, but which are not. Firstly, whether we should be obtaining the maximum cash sale value, or whether we should be increasing the proportion of affordable housing, or whether we should be insisting on a good design brief. Now, the second and third options are obviously going to reduce the sales value, but there's doubtless people in the community who would be happy to see a well-designed project rather than rows of identikit housing, which might be anywhere. But nowhere are they asked for their views on that. And the other point which I think should be asked is whether people want to see any benefit from the sale proceeds. At the moment, we get a few £1,000s a year rent. Potentially, we could be getting anything to £250,000 income from the sale proceeds. And again, that is not highlighted. So, people are asked the question, do you want a large number of houses dumped on what was green space before? Most people would say no. But what we need to alert people to is the benefits which can come from the sale and the investment of those sale proceeds. And those are things I think we need to be asking, because many people will not appreciate it.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. We'll just go round you again, Sarah and Alison, and then if necessary, perhaps David might have something to contribute in that one. So if we just do it in that order, please, Sarah.
Yes, certainly. I think the difficulty we have to be very, very careful of is a lot of that is useful as background information to the consultation. We have to remember that the consultation is on the proposal to dispose of land. So we can bring that type of information in as to what our thoughts may be and what our ideas may be around the use of the land. but we've got to be careful we're not encroaching onto areas of other processes down the line. And I'm thinking, for instance, design brief or more affordable housing or so forth is really directly a planning issue and not a common good consultation issue, because the decision is only on the disposal of the asset. It's not on what then happens with it. And obviously, once we've disposed of it, then that falls into a different camp as far as that decision is concerned. Yes, I agree that perhaps, and I certainly think we need to really be telling people that we could, and we did try to tell people, but obviously, as we found with the development brief, I think there's misunderstanding, and I think people do tend to read what they want to read when they see a document like that. And it's a very difficult thing to try and make the document not too long, but long enough to get all the information in. So I think the point about the fact that actually if the land was sold and the money was invested, you're going to get money coming into the Common Good Fund by way of income that can then be used for community benefit, which obviously at the moment we get a few thousand a year leased for cutting the grass and what have you, and growing crops from the farmers, which really doesn't do any more than just go into the general pot for maintaining assets and so forth, and the community don't see any benefit from it. So I think there's a very valid point there in being able to maybe ensure that people understand that there would flow a benefit from realizing it as an asset. But I think we have to be then very careful. We've always tried to avoid allowing planning type issues to creep into common good consultations, because obviously they're controlled by different legislation, and to a certain extent whatever the common good said here, we could only ever suggest that as a recommendation. We couldn't guarantee that's what would happen.
Yeah, Alison, do you want to add? We'll let them add to things, Peter, and then we'll come back to you. Would that be okay? Alison, if you have any other.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, good points from Sarah. Just back to Councillor Sager's original query around question 2 and whether that could have been a bit more targeted. The reason those 2 particular questions are in there and are quite broad is that they reflect the original questions from phase 1, so to speak, consultation. And the purpose in having them in there is so that if anybody's just answering it who hasn't originally responded to the question, the original consultation, then it gives them the opportunity to answer the same questions in the same way that everyone else has had the opportunity to do so. So that's why they've been included within that particular way within the document. In terms of, I think Sarah summarised the challenges around and the importance of not to encroach onto planning specific issues. I think she's absolutely right, though, around that, realising community benefit, and we could construct a question something along the similar lines to some of the other ones in there around the importance of what people regard, how they relate to the importance around that particular element, so we could gather views in relation to that, and I hope that would be helpful. Thank you.
David, do you have anything perhaps to add at this point?
Just a quick couple of points, Chair. Thank you very much. I think the essence is that your duty is to establish the value to the Nairn Common Good Fund of this development. If you break all this back, ultimately you will be asked to make a final decision on this, and it's got to be based on your fiduciary duty to the fund and balancing the community interest. So I would support what my colleagues have said about the questions. I think what our duty here as officers is to present to you a set of questions that gives people the facts upon which they can make a valued judgment as to what they think is important to them. They feed that back into the process. That comes back to you. It is consultation in that sense. You make the final decision. So I think anything that we can set out to the community in relation to the facts is very important. And I'm with my colleagues absolutely on the issues in relation to avoiding greying the lines between matters which are in the gift of other bodies, i.e. planning, and we've got to be very careful on that. I think that the idea of the building in the space is absolutely right, because in the principle here, this is the biggest decision for Nairn. This is a huge decision for Nairn. So it's absolutely right to build the space in to reach the widest possible reach, if you like. And get to those people who are hardest to reach within the community. And I think the methods set out within the report are really very strong in that regard, especially the establishment of the short life reference group and the references made by Sarah and by Alison to highlight the points that could be brought into play in that regard. So yes, I'm very supportive of it, and I think that the recommendations make absolute sense. Thank you.
If you want to follow up what you have been saying, Peter, and respond to that.
Thanks, Tom. Question 3, how important is the housing element? Do you mean the affordable housing element?
Sarah?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chair, if that's okay. It was just the general housing in terms of the development brief. It doesn't distinguish between the different elements. It sets out the housing element, the green space, etc.
Well, is it not entirely about housing?
In terms of the housing element, yes, we're talking about housing generally within the development brief has different sections of the use of land. So that's the sense to get people's views on those different elements, whether around the use of community facilities, around the use of the green space, around the use of housing, and that there are different parts within the development brief that are set out around about that.
Yes, I think I would agree that there's quite a number of folk have not possibly gone back to the original development brief, the charrette that occurred quite some time ago now. Quite frankly, we had discussions with Highland Housing Association a number of years ago now, and that was entirely within the development brief, but it was focused on Peter's point there, affordable housing, and people were jumping up and down, misunderstanding it before we could even take a step going forward. And it was totally within the remit of the original development brief. So people's understanding, and Sarah did mention in one thing that there are people who either deliberately or otherwise read things into documents, which creates a response that's not actually based, to come back to David's word, not based on the facts, as opposed to opinion. So yeah, it's going to be quite difficult, but I'm with you on the wider groups and ways in which we can try to find slightly more balanced information. But anyway, Laurie, you've been waiting very patiently here.
Sorry, I'm wondering whether there should be some sort of explanation of trustees' duties in relation to selling it, more for the information of the public. And I wonder if we could cover the value. I don't know if it's an easy one to cover, is the value. And you'd have to do an explanation of how you're going to value it in such a way that's independent of the council's opinion or council officer's opinion when they come, if they did come to do a recommendation to sell. The other risk I've picked up on is if you say money is going to be reinvested or sold off, there's a big pot of money there. There are those out in the public who will spend the money before they've even got it, as we all know. And lastly, if we decide, generally it should be pointed out, I think, as well on the issues that even if it's not sold, it still stands as an asset. That's one thing. Respect, you've discussed the housing. The reality is, I know social housing is an issue. We need social housing, but I don't think social housing should be the main thrust for selling, because then you end up with this argument: are we just selling for the Highland Council, but council houses, or are we selling it for value? I think you should avoid that. I think that's my tuppence worth there.
Yeah. David, you came on there. You wish to make some response in there?
Just to perhaps helpfully point out, share a couple of facts here, perhaps to help Councillor Fraser through you. First of all, any independent evaluation would normally be undertaken by the district valuer, so that would be an element of independence. Secondly, at this time, I think remember what you're trying to do here. Just trying to establish the thoughts, as Sarah so eloquently put, of the community. So any determination or discussion about what may or may not happen isn't proper at this stage, I would suggest. So whilst Councillor Fraser makes a point, I would suggest that's perhaps time for another place and another discussion. And I think the other point is that we're just trying to glean the views of the community in the wider sense at the moment. That's all we're trying to do and nothing else, and just to remind ourselves of that. Thank you.
Liz, you want to come back in?
Yeah, I was just to say I support the proposals, especially extending the consultation period, and I think we would give as lengthy a period as we could, since the feedback, give them plenty of time to get in contact with groups and gather the information and get as wide a representation into this as possible. So, I mean, I don't know, we're in the middle of September now, October, November, I would say maybe 10 weeks, and that is closing before the Christmas period, and it's straightforward for folk. That's the time they've got. And I do support the proposal. It's not about selling the land, it's about listening to the community.
Yep.
Good. Sorry, Tom, just a smaller point. I think we need a wee bit of clarity on exactly what the proposals are to dispose, or what sections of land you're talking about here, because I gather you're still retaining the field next to the allotments, and there'll be some of that area allocated for allotment use or not for sale use. I think that needs to be clarified as well.
I think that was in the consultation, and I think an awful lot of people chose to not take account of that. I have 2 allotments out at Sandown, and members of the allotment society had obviously, one way or another, misunderstood and thought that that land was going to be disposed of, and various stories went around. And that's part of what I think Sarah began with, that there's been a lack of clarity by some groups and perhaps individuals in understanding that. I don't know if anyone of the officers wants to come back on anything so far at this stage. Are we okay?
Chair, if I may,
Well,
just to
yep.
clarify on that latter point as well, and it's made reference within the appendix document, the draft consultation document, is that our development plan colleagues are currently working up a graphic to go into that document to support the consultation and just to support the understanding around the use of the land, and as Councillor Fraser's point there as well, clarifying around the use of the allotments, so hopefully it's a bit clearer and to support that understanding and to support people to be able to respond.
Yep. I think that's the key element, to get a response that's based on a word that keeps percolating around here, facts, as opposed to overindulgence in emotion, which obviously has been an element of what's been going on around us. The only other issue around that is I would assume that there will be a further discussion about how we establish the reference group for this particular part of this. I take it that's not for decision today, but a further conversation with officers and members, and deciding again how inclusive we can be in bringing people in to actually ensure that there's a transparent process, where we have deliberately gone out again to ensure that as many folk as possible can make a contribution to this process. That's a kind of open-ended question, so maybe yourself, Alison.
Certainly, Chair. And within the report, what we've highlighted and proposed is that actually the Short Life Reference Group is established through the community partnership. It would seem appropriate to do it through that mechanism and seek, as you say, a broad representation of key stakeholders through the community partnership.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any other thoughts? Well, we go back to what we're doing. Oh, sorry, Peter. I didn't notice.
Time marches on, and we need to get this reference group established as quickly as possible. And there's a community partnerships meeting next Wednesday, is it?
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
Do we want to have something to put to that meeting?
If we go to the partnership, is meeting on the 23rd, which is Thursday. Yeah,
yes.
Next Thursday. Would that be an option? It's a fairly tight time, but Alison, would that perhaps be an option to have a conversation with the chair and of the partnership and put something in place for the next meeting?
Certainly, Chair, we can pick that up with the chair of the partnership and ask to have something on the agenda so that we can bring that to that meeting. Yeah,
that'd be good. That'd be good. Does that meet your requirement, Peter? We okay?
Yes, thank you. Yes, yeah.
Let's go back to what we're being asked to do here, folks, is there at the beginning we're asked to consider and agree the terms of the additional consultation. Now, we didn't specifically go in 10 weeks or 8 weeks, but we are agreed, are we, that this will be concluded by the end of December at the latest. So we could have an 8-week, or if we can squeeze it into 10 weeks, would that be satisfactory, Liz, to the point you made? It's to give Sarah that window at the beginning of 2022 to actually enjoy Christmas, enjoy the new year, and then come back to deal with this. So we're content that that's implicit in what we're doing. So consider and agree the terms of the additional consultation as contained in the draft document and Appendix 1 to the report. Note the reflections on the consultation to date and the proposals for widening the engagement within the additional consultation period, and a discussion on that. Note that a short life reference group will be established to support the further period of consultation, and agree to allow to the end of December for the additional consultation period, with the outcome and recommendations being considered at the first meeting of the Nairnshire Committee 2022. Are we content that that meets the kind of terms, conditions and the basis of our discussion this morning, folks? Are we okay?
Okay.
Right, thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Sarah, for all the work that you do around this, clarifying and being sure that the legal processes are properly followed, and the support also of yourself, Alison and David, in this process. So let's go back to our agenda. Another next matter of our agenda is the place-based funding. I believe that is over to you, Alison, to present that report to us today. Am I correct?
That is correct, Chair. Thank you. I'll just do a brief introduction to the report. So, members, you'll recall that as part of the Council's budget setting process and the Health and Prosperity Strategy, a £100,000 place-based investment fund was agreed for each ward across Highland. It's a flexible fund to address the 4 harms of COVID, and it enables members to consider the priorities at a local level. So the report is, there's 3 different sections to the report. One asking you to agree direct funding today, and others setting out the direction of travel going forward. So Section 5 of the report is proposing direct funding for 2 particular areas of work. The first is to Green Hive to support the development of the Seamen's Hall Community Hub project, and that's proposing an allocation of £25,000. They're currently in phase 1 of this particular project, and this is to support phase 2 development of the project, which is specifically around developing a business plan, architect's drawings and the planning application phase. The detail of the proposal from Green Hive is set out at Appendix 1. So the second proposed direct funding today is around play provision for the area, and that's around developing sustainable play for the community. It's £10,000 that's proposed allocation for that, and the aim really is to take that broader approach to play regarding play areas for social spaces for all ages, but also looking at maybe more natural play of existing features. And again, that's back to looking at that sustainable play provision going forwards. And it's proposed that this would be delivered through the Council's amenities team. So section 6 of the report sets out a proposal for proposed sums to be ring-fenced for 2 key areas of work. The first is around the development of accessibility projects that are being led by the Nairn Access Panel. And that's particularly in relation to supporting the wheelchair access to the beach, that project that's been taken forward. Work is ongoing by the Access Panel to pull a proposal together, and that would come forward to the next meeting. But it is proposed today to ring-fence £10,000 of the Place-Based Investment Fund towards this. The second area under this is to ring-fence £5,000 towards health and wellbeing outcomes, proposals, projects to improve health and wellbeing outcomes that are being led by the Community Partnership, and a proposal would come forward to the next committee in this regard. So the final section of the report, section 7, is really noting that, or asking you to note that there are projects underway and proposals underway to allocate the remaining funding first to motorhome infrastructure development within the town, but also to support the development of town centre projects. Proposals will come forward to the next committee to be considered in this regard, but this is just setting out that these are 2 key areas for proposals to come forward to the next committee. So members, happy to pick up on any questions, and the recommendations are set out at section 2 in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Okay, folks, any questions? We did have a very full discussion with this prior to Emma going on medical leave, but there may be some follow-up. Liz?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Under 5.6, the play provision and the 10,000, I've very much welcome that. And I wonder if the amenities officers could work closely with Nairn Play to try and help them to deliver on their project, as well as the wider natural environment that they're going to be dealing with. And I welcome the money as well for the Access Panel to help deliver their beach access improvements, which both of these projects have received funding from Levitt Lodge trustees. And it's great to see the council being so supportive and helping to deliver them. So I'd just like to thank that, and I think it's great we've got this money locally that we can use to enhance the area. So thank you for that.
Yep. Thank you, Liz. We do have the 2 additional. David's going to have to help me out here. The description of the job remit of those 2 officers I met yesterday, temporary appointees. Can you tell me their official designation again, please, David?
I think you're referring to community support coordinators.
That's the word I was looking for, sir.
Yes, indeed. That's Jamie McGimpsey and Lynn Lang, and we also have Carol Butler, but Carol's focus is on Badenoch and Strathspey, but Lynn and Jamie are there to work with us on enabling.
Yeah.
They enable and will work with us on doing so. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, just to follow up what Liz has said there, 2 things. One, I had a meeting with them actually on site at the Riverside, which included talking about Nairn Play and the area that they're interested in. And just how we might break that piece of work down and bring some of it to fruition over the next year, hopefully, to see. But very positive to have them there, and the fact that we have some money in funds, perhaps, to enable them. They're not delivering projects, as you pointed out, but to enable them in any consultation or information sharing. And the other very interesting thing there, just to share this for a moment, is that the tenant participation officer has identified, some people in Queen's Park who are very strongly wishing to be involved, and that's in addition to folk that have already been there. So we have a group of people now who are going to be able to bring a whole lot of this place-based investment, health, well-being, these outcomes together and actually begin to achieve things. And finally, he said, rabbiting on a wee bit, I think Laura Burns, the engineer who supervised the work at the courthouse, she has or will be bringing forward to us a feasibility study on the beach access thing. I think that's fairly imminent. Liz, I don't know if she's been in touch with yourself yet. Not yet. Well, we'll ensure that happens sooner rather than later. But anyway, that's good. Any other thoughts around this? No? Well, we're quite content with that then. So if I look at the recommendations found at section 2, consider and agree the proposed allocation of the place-based fund, direct funding to Green Hive for the Siemens Hall project, feasibility study stage, 25,000. Not near and play, but play a facility as agreed, and consider and agree at section 2 the proposed sums which are ring fenced there, and note that work is underway to explore allocating remaining funding to the development of motorhome infrastructure and to support the development of town centre projects, and proposals will be brought for consideration to future meetings. Are we content with that, folks? They're okay? Alison, thank you very much for all the work that you continue to do in supporting us, helping us in the background. And again, David, the Lynn and Jamie who were there yesterday, I was more than impressed with their understanding. So I look forward to being able to work with them and enable projects to be progressed in and around us. So thank you very much indeed, and thank you especially, Alison, for your work as well. We're content with that, folks. Ready to move on? Okay. Thank you. Right, I see we have David with us this morning, and we have our housing performance report. So, David, we look forward to you presenting that for us. Oh, sorry, we have Brian here as well. Am I misreading this, David or Brian? Or is this a double act? Is this an Anton Deck act?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's a double act this morning.
Okay, well, they do housing, but it's bricks they appear with on an advert, I think, if you throw them all over the place. But anyway, enough of that nonsense, gentlemen. You are welcome. And I'll look forward to your contribution to our meeting and highlighting any concerns or anything we need to address. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This morning, I'd like to present the Housing Performance Report for Q1, the period covering April to June 2021. Afterwards, I'll invite Brian to give you a more specific update on the capital programme. But initially, I'd like to start with emergency repairs. If we look at the report, there's an improvement on the time taken to complete emergency repairs in there, standing currently at 4.6 hours, which is clearly within the 14-hour target and certainly better than the Highland-wide average of 5.7 hours. Again, moving on to non-emergency repairs, the time taken to complete non-emergency repairs is back within the 8-day target, pleasingly, currently standing at 7.8 days. This is also better than the Highland-wide average of 16.2 days. As the backlog of non-emergency repairs reduces that built up during the COVID restrictions, we hope to see an ongoing improvement in performance in this field. The relet times have also improved since the last quarter, standing at 30.64 days, again within the 35-day target time, and also less than the Highland-wide average of 33.51 days. So also quite pleasing. Rent arrears continue to improve with the volume decreasing since last quarter. I think if we look at it a bit more closely, we can attribute this to the increased face-to-face contact between officers and tenants, and also the quicker processing of universal credit. That said, the officers will still continue to focus on rent arrears, and they'll continue to be proactive in contacting tenants, and they will continue to offer advice and help or refer to appropriate advice agencies. If we move on to homelessness, over the quarter, we had 11 presentations. This is fairly consistent and in line with what we would expect during this period. The housing options officers also continue to provide a great deal of advice, and they indulge in homeless prevention as much as they possibly can. So if we move on to the appendix at the end of the report, there are no red indicators, but there is one amber. This refers to the percentage of lettable houses becoming vacant. On further scrutiny, this relates directly to sheltered housing. Because of the relatively low numbers that we have, any additional vacancies that come along actually affect the performance figures, and that's what's happened in this case. So that really concludes the main points of the report. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, folks. Anyone wanting to raise any issue at the moment? We content with that, Peter?
Yes, just to say that once again, it's an excellent report, and the team are doing very well again, David, and I think we should all like to pass on our thanks there, because this is a very important issue, housing to many people. And I just wish some of the rest of the areas of the Highland Council area are quite as good as you guys are. So.
Thank you, Councillor Saggers. That's very much appreciated. I will pass on your thoughts to these team members.
Yep. Indeed, I think that's. I think we all echo that one. That the work, the genuine work that's done, and actually, in the midst of that, what an awful lot of folk forget is they don't seem to understand that officers in certain positions care very deeply and actually do feel a bit of the pain that other people feel. I don't think that's always appreciated. I think there's a kind of assumption that the council employees are just tick the box kind of characters, but I think given that they live in communities, they share the same concerns, and quite frankly, on occasion, the same pain. And I would echo what Peter's just said, the hard work of the people, and even looking at the rent arrears in a time of very difficult financial circumstances, to be reducing rent arrears when everybody's expecting them to go through the roof is quite an astonishing achievement, really. So again, we've every reason to echo what Peter has just said, and certainly take that back to any members of staff that you can, please. Now we're looking for Ant or Deck now, Brian, and we're doing the capital one now. Are we okay?
I don't know if I should say thanks or not, Councillor Hagee. That's a new one on me. I'll just really briefly give an update in the capital programme. I think the appendix gives a little bit more detail as to how the projects are going. Obviously, it's been a theme of the last year as such in regard to the pandemic, and we're basically spending this year trying to catch up on previous year's works, and also trying to manoeuvre our way through all the additional COVID guidance, whether it be about multi-trades working together in confined spaces, about PPE equipment, and all the kind of delays that's causing, including some material delays and supply chain delays. In terms of the Nairn programme itself, that's probably bucking the trend a little bit compared to the rest of Highland. as it stands, we're anticipating that most of the current projects should be completed on site by March 2023. March 2022. So in that sense, we're anticipating the delivery of the programme. Generally speaking, things are going quite well. One or two issues with the kitchen contract and also the heating contract, and we've had to intervene with contractors in the last couple of weeks just to make sure the level of performance is what it is. One or two issues with the standard of workmanship, and one or two issues with tenant communications. But generally speaking, our satisfaction levels for most of the properties seem to be doing quite well. And I think it's great testament to our tenants as well that they've been very supportive of officers and contractors in terms of adjusting to some of the delays, and also adjusting to the inconvenience and disruption that some of the capital works have caused. But generally speaking, things are going quite well, and we should deliver on time this financial year. We will need to schedule in at Ward Business Meeting a discussion about future year's capital programme, and basically just looking with members to see what the priorities are for next financial year, possibly further afield. So I'll look forward to meeting up with members, and also my colleague Issy McKeever, who's the new Housing Investment Officer, to have those discussions in the autumn time. And I'll certainly welcome member thoughts as to what the priorities are for capital works in there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Liz?
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. I'd just like to ask, under the third line down, the CHS 19039 heating in Nairn, and there's over 40,000, well, 43,000 not going to be spent due to tenants opting out. I wonder what reason they opted out for. Did they feel it wasn't such a good system they were being offered, or because it seems to me we'll be trying to improve the energy efficiency of all our homes. So, and if people have opted out and then they give up the council house, can you go back in then and do the works when the house is empty?
Thanks, Councillor. That's a good question. Tenant opt-outs from capital works always seem to feature, no matter how much correspondence and communication we have in advance, whether it be about whatever type of improvement is or trying to minimise disruption. The bottom line is that, particularly for non kind of health and safety works, some tenants will always want to opt out of works. As having talked to officers in the last few months, there are some tenants who are still very anxious about having trades in their property, despite all the assurances about PPE and safe working practices. We have spoken to some of the tenants about potentially putting them on a future year's programme when hopefully some of the anxiety regarding the pandemic has eased off a bit. But you mentioned a good point there about whenever a tenant leaves. So if a tenant's opted out of work, we record that, and then what we do is have the conversation with an incoming tenant so they don't kind of miss out as such. It is a bit inconvenient, I have to admit, in regard to that, and for the new tenant moving in as such, there's usually a little bit of a gap between being able to organise that future work as such. So we do try and minimise opt-outs if at all possible, and I was actually speaking to colleagues earlier this week about just trying to do a bit more tenant liaison work in regard to that, and just whatever concerns people have, if it's to do with a heating system or if it's to do with the inconvenience of works, just trying to go a wee bit that extra mile, trying to get them to just sign up for the work. And because they're on a project for a reason, it's because they've got an old heating system or an older bathroom or kitchen, and it's an interest of ourselves as a council, but obviously them as a tenant that the work gets done. But it's certainly something we're going to be trying to review in due course to make sure we minimise the number of opt-outs.
Thank you. And the other wee question I had was about fire alarms, and the responsibility of fire alarms in people's homes, because there's new legislation coming in from February next year. So is it up to the council to put these wireless alarms in, or?
In a nutshell, councillor, yes, it's a responsibility of all landlords, and as a social landlord, we're still waiting on final guidance from the Scottish Housing Regulator how we report compliance, but we do need to comply with the legislation by the end of February 2022. We've got a programme of works going on throughout Highland. There's still an awful lot of addresses which require the work to take place. We kind of missed the whole period of the lockdown, which would have, so we've missed out in a few months there being able to get the works done then. But as it stands, if we keep up with the schedule of works and the programme that we're doing, we will be fully compliant by February 2022. We're hoping to put out something in the next tenant newsletter just to try and give a bit more detail to tenants, just to remind them to permit access, and also trying to tie it in with some of the home fire safety visits that the fire service do. So I suspect it's going to become more and more of a public issue as well. I know members have had a few queries, and I was speaking to Environmental Health at the start of the week, who are working on a member briefing as well, which should hopefully help with some of those queries, because it's, you know, we're getting homeowners and private landlords asking, and they'll have to organise the works as well. There may be issues across Highland with contractor capacity. We're okay as it stands in terms of the council housing, but I suspect that electricians will be snowed under for the next few months trying to do all this work.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter.
Just quickly say that we have had the alarms fitted in our house some 3 months ago, so we're ahead of the game there. On the same line as Liz was commenting on, CSH 19039, does that cover the air source heat pumps that have been put into certain properties?
Yes, councillor, yeah, it does.
I had a complaint from somebody who lives in Piper Hill and had one of these air source heat pumps installed, and her main complaints were that the radiator that was replaced in her sitting room was very much larger than the one in place beforehand, and it is now very obtrusive. Secondly, that the air source heat pump takes up a substantial proportion of her already very small garden. And thirdly, that she was given no instructions as to how the system worked. And I just wonder what the policy is for consulting with tenants before these systems are installed, and whether any study has been done as to the electricity costs before and after, and whether the tenant is better off or worse off financially as a result of the new system.
Thanks, councillor. I think I responded to that complaint a couple of weeks ago to yourself, so some of those details might be a bit more detailed in my response to you. I did also make sure there was a response out to that particular tenant as well earlier on this week, so I'm hoping that's maybe resolved some of her complaint as such. Just in terms of, you know, speaking generally, tenants are visited by the contractor ahead of carrying out works such as air source heat pumps. They're given details as to what it might involve in terms of the sizing of the radiators, the size of the radiators. That's all equivalent to kind of heat loss calculations and all that kind of technical information just to make sure it's the right heating system for the property, and that assessment is done. I think in this particular case, obviously I won't go into specific details, but I think the contractor felt that they had communicated all this to the tenant and had moved radiators accordingly in line with the tenant request as such. I did, however, feel having looked at the itself that they should have done a bit of additional communication work with the tenant and put some more detail in writing to them, just to fully clarify what it would mean in terms of a loss of space and a fighting of the radiators. In regard to instructions, I know that the contractor's also been back out last week to meet with the tenant and just talk them through the instruction manual that they were left with. I think it probably just demonstrates that, in some cases we just need to do a bit of additional tenant liaison work if need be, and just make sure that whenever we do install a heating system that tenants are comfortable with it. We also ask tenants after the installs, we usually leave it a few weeks just to allow a period of time for them to kind of get used to the heating system, to get some fuel bills in as well. We do offer the opportunity for independent energy advisors to go in, just to give them a bit more advice as to how they're using the heating system, and also to check they're on the right tariff as such. We'll do that with this heating contract in due course as well. We usually find it's best to leave it a few weeks until the system is kind of settled down as such and the tenant is using it, and then we'll do that. If it's okay with yourself, Councillor Saggers, I can maybe get that in some type of report to yourself, maybe to all the members in due course once the independent advisors have gone in, and just to maybe try and detail what that experience has been like, and if there's any issues outstanding. Just let me know if that's suitable.
Would that be okay, Peter?
Yes, yes, indeed, yes. Yeah, I would appreciate some feedback as to how the system is working.
Yeah, and if that's shared with us, as I think you're suggesting, Brian, with all members, so that if we do get similar challenges, that we have that shared information. Is that okay?
That's fine, Councillor Heggie. If you leave it with us, usually it takes a little bit of time to get that organised and the results and stuff to come back in. But I'll certainly share that in due course with all the members.
That's okay. Thank you, Laurie.
It was just a quickie one. I take it there'll be is it going to be a balanced budget at the end of the year? Because I see some of them are up 40,000, some were down 30,000, and will there be money to carry forward for additional projects? And the other small point on the heating systems, it is actually getting more and more complicated heating systems for some of our tenants. It is quite difficult, even the private sector with problems with heating systems. So you have my sympathy there.
In terms of the overall budget, I think it's maybe a wee bit too early to say what the final outturns will look like. Those estimates that are provided today, if there's potential for carry forward, we'll certainly propose that to a future committee as such. And if there's potential where there's maybe been an underspend against a couple of projects, for example, then I've got absolutely no problem at all proposing that to members as well. If for example they want to kind of marry that up with an overspend against a different project, I think I detailed in the appendix that we're likely to exceed the budget when it comes to one-off heating replacements, and that's just where we have unanticipated failures where we need to replace the heating system as a one-off as such. So I'll certainly report back in due course just to advise members what the final outturns will look like.
Okay, thank you very much. Just one thing that you mentioned in passing really was the supply chain for some of the contractors. We seem to be getting news that wood is in short supply, for construction and so on. You seem very confident, and rightly so, I would believe, because you're professional, that everything will be done within the time frame, the end of March. But is that in any other way possibly going to affect the work going forward, or are contractors managing okay?
Thanks, Councillor. And I think for Nairn, I don't think, partly because of the size of projects and dare I say it, because just the experience of the contractors involved, it doesn't seem to be as big a problem as elsewhere in Highland. Obviously, time will tell as to if it will be or not. Across the projects elsewhere in Highland, we are reporting shortages with materials, particularly wood, cement products, that type of thing. Even the likes of windows for just getting them brought into supply. There have been issues elsewhere in Highland where some of the tenders have not been returned by contractors. They've basically decided not to price for certain works, and I think that reflects some of their uncertainties as to being able to put in competitive prices, some staffing issues, and that type of thing. I suspect that later on this year we might have to. I have to go to December Housing and Property Committee to propose future years funding. It might well be that we have to propose that maybe next year's Highland-wide allocation is maybe slightly less than we would like, simply because we probably won't be able to deliver quite the same volume of works across Highland, and then maybe we look at catching up on that maybe 2-3 years down the line. It's one of these things where I suspect that a lot of contractors are still trying to feel their way through the kind of the pandemic related issues, and still trying to work out how competitive they can be in their price and how they can meet timescales that we set them in regards to delivering contracts. As it stands at the minute for Nairn this year's programme, it looks okay. I'd be reluctant to make estimates as to future years, as to potential delays and that type of thing.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's okay. Anybody, any other thoughts, comments, questions? We okay? Okay, folks, we go back to at the beginning our recommendations. Simply, members are invited to consider the information provided on housing performance in the period April to June. Are we okay with that? No concerns. Again, just to re-emphasise, I think both you gentlemen representing this particular area of service, I think you can confidently go back to all staff and say we are more than happy, in fact delighted with the performance of yourselves and all the staff members in achieving the outcomes that are in this report. So thank you very much indeed, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Thank you.
Members, I think we've temporarily lost the chair. His link must have gone down. I'm sure he'll join us very quickly again. We'll just perhaps give it a moment. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Welcome back.
My apologies. I clicked on the wrong thing there. Peter has two mice, I've got two eyes, but maybe the one doesn't work very well. My apology for that, folks. Now we move on to our winter maintenance, and I think we've got Richard with us. Good morning, Richard. Welcome to our meeting, and we look forward to you presenting the report. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, members. David, thanks very much. Good to be here. Yes, thanks. So this is the annual winter maintenance plan for Nairnshire, for roads winter maintenance. It's quite a brief format, this report. So it feels a bit like a formality, and that's because there's really no change either to the policy, the budget, resources, or the plan. the plan, including road priorities, etc. So in that respect, it's quite a brief report. So I would welcome any questions, but also I suppose I could mention a couple of things to do with winter maintenance more on the detail, such as in terms of road sensors for the network, which we rely on when we're decision making as to what treatment is required on a daily basis all through the winter. In Nairnshire, there's one up at believe it on the A939. We also get information from the one further out in Barnhof-Spey up on the Dava, and we have one at Cawdor. These are all Highland Council sensors. We do also get information from the trunk road sensor down on the A96 as well. But we don't have anything in Nairn itself, which has always been a bit of an issue. And sometimes it can be very marginal conditions, and it'd be helpful to have more accurate information in the town. So it looks like we're going to have an additional sensor in the town, which is very welcome to our team. In terms of salt and actual preparations underway for this winter as we come out of the summer, all our salt was loaded into Park Quarry Depot over the last couple of weeks, so we now have our salt stockpile fully stocked. We always get assistance from our colleagues in the amenity service for the treatment of the footways in Nairnshire, and we've been having the usual liaison with them and confirming that that's all set up. And we used to have just one footway tractor in Nairn, but now we have two, and that's made a big difference. And we've needed that as the town has grown and the new housing areas have developed. On that note, as I say, no change this year, but we're keeping a very close eye on that, because there'll come a tipping point where we would probably want to have an additional road vehicle as well. So that's something we're looking very closely at. Having said that, we're confident that the route priorities, the routes, and the number of vehicles and drivers that we have in place are quite adequate for this coming winter. And we do always have the option to call on local contractors, as we did last year in time of snow, and that worked well. I was going to mention drivers there because it's in the news nationally about shortage of drivers. We only have one vacancy in Nairnshire at the moment, but it is a vacancy and they are proving hard to fill. But we're optimistic we still have time to fill that, probably through agency just to start with. So that shouldn't be an issue. Although it's something we're keeping a close eye on, and I am in my wider area, because we do have other vacancies, and some of them are proving hard to fill due to the national shortage of drivers. And in it mentions in the report, of course, at the very end, the winter resilience scheme, which is still operating. So communities still have the option to self-help. Quite often that comes with a request for a whole heap of extra salt bins, and that's something we have to manage quite carefully. Obviously, the whole idea is that the community can supplement what we already do, and that it can include spreading some salt. So a strategic salt supply is important for them for that. And that will be considered, but it doesn't necessarily mean a whole raft of new salt bins, because that can be very demanding on resources, and we have already quite an established network of salt bins around the town, and villages. So when a salt bin request is being considered, it's there's 4 criteria really that we're looking at. That is whether there's an existing service, what the elevation is above sea level, what the steepness in the slope is, and what the footfall is for that area. So that's for a general salt bin request, not so much for a winter resilience request, where we basically are looking for somewhere strategic for salt to go to allow the community to spread some salt themselves if they don't already have salt bins that are accessible to them. So I thought it was useful to highlight that distinction.
Yep.
So I think that's probably all the points of information that I was going to mention. I've remembered one more. Last year we got additional funding for footway treatment associated with COVID to try and limit the pressure on the NHS that sometimes we get in winter due to slips and falls on footways in particular. I personally just come back from leave, so apologies. I haven't actually managed to get an answer prior to committee today as to whether that is in place again for this year. Obviously, the situation with COVID is very different in many ways, and yet there's still a threat in the background. And I know that in the news this morning there was an article on the NHS about potential for a perfect storm, which may affect the NHS in terms of COVID and people's reduced resistance to the flu in general and other winter ailments and the pressure of the cold weather. So despite a change in the COVID situation, there could be considerable pressure on the NHS again this winter. So we're mindful of that. That's a question I need to get answered. But if there is additional funding, we'll obviously make use of that and make sure that we provide the very best service with footways that we can. On that note, with COVID, that was the other pressure on the service potentially last year. If staff have to self-isolate, if that includes gritter drivers, then potentially we have a problem. And that's what is explained in the report, that we would basically use a hierarchical approach if it came to it and we were forced to provide a reduced service. Obviously, we're looking at other options where we can bring in drivers from within the council, from other services. If we've set that up in advance, obviously, so that there's an element of training so that they could step in and help out. But we could end up in a position where we have to hopefully it won't happen. We managed to survive last winter, and it's the situation with COVID now is a better one with the impact of all the vaccinations and the shortened length of time required for self-isolating if you're proving negative because of that. So we're optimistic that hopefully things won't be too bad in terms of COVID this winter. Thanks, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Liz, you were first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It says in the report that there's the resources and the budget is the same as last year, but I'm wondering have the costs gone up, and will that mean in effect a reduction in any service? And also under 3.1 in the policy in regard to gritting, it goes there'll be no guarantee that gritting will be done before buses have been round. And I'm just thinking, with a good winter last year, but if we've got a bad winter, that could really affect the outlying areas of the ward, children coming down from Glenfernus and Codderway. And I remember in previous years, I've had concerns from parents about the safety of the bus without the roads being gritted. So any comments on that? Thanks.
Councillor, Chairman, it's the usual difficulty, that one. It's a perpetual problem. It tends to be an issue when we, not in routine gritting, but if we have a significant snowfall. And I mentioned contractors earlier, and that's the option that we have, and we've built up quite a good relationship with local contractors now. So that is our get out of jail card in those situations, and we would hope to make good use of that if the need arises.
Any comment about the potential rise in costs, Richard? And is Is there a possibility of reduction of service because of increased costs in any way?
Well, I gratefully welcome that comment because it highlights the general position with the roads budget, the roads revenue budget. It's a very real situation, and it's actually been ongoing for a long time, and it needs to be talked about openly. You know, if the budget flatlines while inflation is increasing, then inevitably the real result is pressure due to an effective cut. If the budget doesn't increase annually in line with inflation, so that's always going to be a problem. But what I would say, when it comes to winter maintenance and our other maintenance operations, they're kind of mutually exclusive. Our team and our resources are either doing one or the other. So where we're spending extra time on winter maintenance, potentially if we get a bad winter, then we're doing less of these other activities, and the budget will balance itself out. But overall, yeah, the pressure is increased if the budget doesn't increase in line with inflation, the revenue budget.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Laurie, and then we'll come back to you, David.
I was at, for my sins, I went up to the East Nairnshire Community Council meeting last night. They're looking, they've been asking for salt grit bins and been declined on a number of occasions. They're now looking either, if they can't get them, can they buy them and can you fill it? But I don't know if you'll do that. If you're in a position to do that, if you're saying you're not doing bins out with Nairn, perhaps you could explain and if need be write to the Community Council and tell them why we can't supply bins. And the other thing they brought up was they had to continuously chase to get the Glenfernus village snowplowed or gritted. I don't know if there's a problem there, whether you just do the red routes and then go back up a few hours later to do the blue routes. Maybe that needs explanation as well. Okay.
I'm pretty sure Glenfernus village is on a red route.
The village is not on the red. The village is not on the red route. The route is, but they're not the village.
Yeah. And that's always going to be a bone of contention, I think, unless we change the priority. The grit bin request, I'll have to consult with the team and see what's been going on there, and
okay,
then I can report back on that one.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Ian. Okay.
Cheers.
David, you wish to come in?
Just briefly, Chair, just to point out, of course, Mr. Porteous's points are absolute, and it's from the service budget point of view, very no comment to make there, other than to say that, of course, the council's winter maintenance policy is a policy of the council. So it has agreed to apply its resources to deliver that. And as we know, as you know, Chair, through you, that if it's a bad winter, then the council will look to ensure that it delivers on that policy. So it's just a point to note the policy's there, and the council is expected to deliver that policy as per the agreement reached, no matter what the position is. Thank you.
Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, comments, folks? We okay? Well, we're just asked to, it's at 2.1, we're asked just to approve the winter maintenance plan for Nairnshire in reference to the briefing note, which is in the appendix in our documents. Are we content with that? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Richard, for your report and your continuing work and the many challenges that you face, not just winter maintenance, but some of the other things that are ongoing in and around our ward. So thank you, and thank your staff very much for the work that you do for us. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll pass that on to the team.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll try and not leave the meeting, folks. I'll try and stay in the meeting this time around. Dear oh dear, tells you, old age catching up. We're now on to item 8 on the agenda, the Common Good Fund Monitoring Report. I think that's yourself, David, is it?
It is, Chair. Thank you very much. And members, I'll just briefly introduce the report, page 43 of your papers. As you say, Chair, item 8. This gives a summary to you, members, of the performance of your fund to date. and it's neatly divided into revenue activity and your investment performance. There is mention of that, and importantly, any relevant projects that are underway. So the recommendations are for you to action. Clearly scrutinize the activity, and just note the decisions that have been taken between the time this was last reported and now in respect of expenditure that was required due to urgent action being needed. On your income, Chair, it's doing okay. Clearly, there have been pressures as a result of COVID, and paragraph 4.3 highlights those. Decisions have been taken in the best interest of the community to, for example, attract the funfair to Nairn at a time when the funfair would prove very beneficial to the community and uplift their spirits as an appropriate for the Common Good Fund, and not only that, but help footfall in the town centre. So that decision was taken and is reported. That has had an influence on income. It's not just that, of course, it's the fact that there have been no Nairn games this year, and it's just a point to note that it has had a pressure on your income for this year. We've also taken steps, as I say, to undertake some urgent expenditure, and those are highlighted at 4.7. The project highlighted in this report, which is the Harbour Street toilets, and I say project because this is something very close to your hearts and that of the community, has been properly considered, and the recommendation within this report is to take on board the wish to properly evaluate the operation of the toilets, but not to undertake their operation for the remainder of this year. And that is applying good governance to the use of the fund, Chair, in relation to the costs that would be required to be undertaken now just to commission the toilets for a very short period of time. So the recommendation is that a feasibility study is undertaken and that the matter is reported back to you early in 2022, so you may make a decision in respect of the next season, effectively from April next year, and all the matters relating to that are reported within the papers. Other than that, I've got nothing further to add, but we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, any questions, comments? Peter?
At the Nairn bid board meeting last night, the board confirmed that having refurbished the shelter and signboards at Cumming Street, they have nearly completed the ones up by the swimming pool, and they will then be starting work on the one down by the harbour. But it was pointed out to me that the access to these shelters are largely or potentially dangerous because of the Cumming Street one and the Harbour one being on a sandy area. The ground has been worn away by people's feet, and if anybody injured themselves, there would be a potential claim against the Common Good Fund. So I was asked whether the Common Good Fund would be prepared to remedy the ground conditions, possibly with some concrete paving, slabs, or whatever is required. So this is potentially another smallish item of expenditure that we would need to be looking at.
David, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and thanks to Councillor Saggers for raising that point. Clearly, any matter relating to the health and safety and well-being of people is of the highest importance. So what I'll undertake to do, Chair, from that point being raised, is to speak with our colleagues within the Council and ensure that a safety audit is undertaken in respect to the respective paths, and any works that are required as a result of that audit will be properly addressed and in accordance with them being urgently required, perhaps undertaken between now and the next committee and reported back to you. Happy to do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Just to clarify, if I may, it's the actual areas within the shelters that are damaged, and it was pointed out of course, that because of this, there's no wheelchair access because wheelchairs can't go over the rough ground.
I'm sure an audit would highlight that, hopefully, and ensure that the appropriate work is completed. I was noting I go down to the leisure centre fairly frequently, and I was noting the work being done there, but I must admit I hadn't noted the groundwork. I'd noted the other work that was being done. Is anyone any other question to raise here? I've had quite a lot of discussion about a number of things around the common good over the last few months. So we look at the recommendations, folks, which are there on page 43, going on to page 44. We have scrutinised, we've obviously had discussions around this. I note the position of the Common Good Fund as shown in Q1 revenue monitoring statement against budget for 21-22. And we've been asked to homologate work that had to be undertaken, urgent necessary repairs, interventions due to health and safety concerns, and or to prevent further degradation in Nairn Common Good Fund property. Granting a waiver of the usual fee for the use of the links by the fund fair for 9 to 21st August. And I think we can all agree that went very well. And agree to defer commissioning further non-essential refurbishment work to the Harbour Street toilet block, pending an additional assessment on the viability and justification of reinstating the building as a public convenience, and a report coming back to our first scheduled meeting in 2022. Are we content with that, folks? Are we okay? Well, thank you very much. And in the background, thank you very much, Lorraine, for monitoring us. We hope it hasn't been too boring for you, Kate, observing what's going on as well. And we move on to the final item there, which is just noting the minutes. Has anybody any question of the accuracy of the minute of our last meeting? No, we're okay with that. Well, on that basis, folks, thank you very much indeed for your time, your attendance, and your interest. And we no doubt shall meet again before too long. So thank you all very much indeed. Tthank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Members.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lorraine. Bye-bye.